I am Bryce Newberger, and this is the Kinship Chronicles, Children of the Phoenix. Chapter 35. After King Denigno had humbly apologized for his outburst, there was a beckoning for the two travelers to stay a few days in the palace. But Mel had declined under the reason that he had other works to be about. Eldrich had pondered if that was true. The hermit had seemed to have just sat in solitude for years before he rescued him. The boy began to think that maybe this man sat in seclusion, only popping out of hiding to complete drastic missions, like diverting a global war. Since Eldrich had seen Mel's true form, Melchizedek, he seemed to be in a constant state of wonder. He no longer found his strange philosophies to be foolish and queer. The 11-year-old was quite won over by now. They were leaving the city around dusk when Eldrich looked up to his master and asked, "Will I ever be able to look like you did?" Mel chuckled at the question. "That visage I adopted was simply the Creator allowing you all to see how I truly look." Eldrich's jaw hung open. "You mean you look like that right now?" "There are two dimensions that overlap," Mel attempted to explain. "Well, really, there are many dimensions. That is, aspects of measurable extents, height, depth, breadth, and what have you." Mel could tell the boy's understanding, and relatedly his attention was slipping. "There is a dimension of spiritualism that overlaps what you see and feel. Every so often your senses can cross over, and you will see things you can't explain, incorporeal things like ghosts, wisps, and ghouls. What you saw was how I appear in the spirit realm." Eldrich squinted at the slender teacher, then turned his scrutiny to himself. "How do I look?" he asked as he turned his hands over a few times. Mel thought for a moment, then said, "Let me see if I can show you." He pressed his hand over Eldrich's eyes and whispered something indistinct. When he removed his hands, Eldrich almost had a young heart attack as he witnessed Melchizedek in his full alighted glory. He then looked about other passers-by. Most were dull black outlines with small flickering lights hidden deep within. There was one impressive specimen he noticed aside from Melchi. This being wasn't as blinding, but was still awfully bright. Eldrich noticed that it was a woman dressed in silver armor and an impressive physique of an outline. But if one looked closely, they could see her real outline was of a small, frail, old woman. She turned and smiled sweetly at him, oblivious to how he was truly seeing her. Eldrich then remembered that this was all about him observing his spiritual appearance. Eldrich was depressed then when he saw he was dim and lackluster in his spiritual form. He frowned at his brilliant master. "Why am I so dark?" Melchi explained, "Because you are very weak spiritually, though we will remedy that over time." "So, we stopped the war," Eldrich surmised. "Now what happens?" "I will take you back to the cabin and finish your training." The pupil smiled. He had thought that now that they completed their mission, the elder would have no more use for him. "Good." Melchi sensed his true thoughts. "The Creator has plans for you, Eldrich. Plans that stretch beyond your wildest imagination. Stopping a war is only the beginning." "My wildest imagination? How do you know all this?" "There are things that he has made manifest to me about your future. I do not know the full story, but I have caught highlights." Eldrich's mind went wild with pictures of himself, standing in front of an army chanting his name. Then he was sitting on a golden throne before a host of servants bowing down to him. He was breaking the back of a giant beast man when he was shaken by Melchi. "Eldrich," he was laughing, "don't focus on these images of yours." "How do you know what I'm thinking?" The boy felt amazed and fearful. "When you peer into the spirit realm, you can catch images and whispers of people's true natures and thoughts." He gestured around to the crowd. "Go ahead, try it." Eldrich had not noticed anything about seeing into people's heads before. He looked at the dim-lit masses but didn't perceive anything in particular. The young protege attempted to focus on one individual instead of scrutinizing the masses. His target was a specifically dark man who was walking hunched over, as if keeping treasure hidden in his bosom. While most of the outlines were a slight gray with a small flicker of light hidden deep within, this shadow was pure black, without a glimmer of illumination whatsoever. He squeezed his eyes tight as if he were focusing on a telescope. Through the gates. Take a right. Up the wall through the access hatch. Eldrich heard the voice whisper in his head. He then caught a picture of the man stabbing and killing a palace guard. Uh-oh. Master? I saw it as well. Perhaps we should stick around after all. Thank you for listening. I'm Bryce Newberger, and this has been the Kinship Chronicles, Children of the Phoenix. If you enjoyed what you heard and you'd like to purchase the full book, then either look up New Books on the Google Play Bookstore, NEU Books, or simply click the link in the description. The book is only $5, and I appreciate your support.